The air inside the scorpion's tail was a suffocating blend of stale beer, cigarette smoke that clung to everything despite the ban, and the acrid tang of testosterone turning sour. It was the only civilian watering hole within 10 miles of Fort Sentinel, a sun-bleached outpost in the New Mexico desert, where soldiers went to forget they were still in uniform, even when they weren't. The walls told stories in faded photographs. Grenada, 1983. Young men with M16s and jungle fatigues, their faces hard with the kind of certainty that only comes before you've seen what a bullet does to bone. Panama, 1989. Night vision green images of airborne drops parachutes blooming like deadly flowers over Torrijos. And Desert Storm. Always Desert Storm. The last clean war, the last time America had crushed an enemy so completely that victory tasted like it was supposed to taste. Kate Morrison sat at the far end of the bar, a glass of water in front of her, condensation tracking slow lines down the sides like silent tears. She wore canvas work pants the color of desert dust and a plain gray t-shirt that hung loose enough to hide the lean muscle underneath. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun blonde, going dark with sweat at the roots. She looked like what she was supposed to look like, a logistics contractor, one of the faceless civilians who kept military bases running, forgettable as furniture. But she wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't reading. She was watching. Her eyes moved across the room with a predator's patience, cataloging exits, counting bodies, measuring distances. The main door 12 feet to her left. The emergency exit near the bathrooms 23 feet behind her, partially blocked by a pool table. The large window facing the parking lot, reinforced glass, would take 3 seconds to break and clear. 4 men at the corner booth, getting louder with each round. 2 more at the dartboard. The bartender, an older man with the rolling gait of someone whose knees had given up the fight years ago. Her right hand rested on the bar, fingers drumming an unconscious rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap, 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 tap. If anyone had been paying attention, if anyone had known Morse code, they would have recognized it. DTS. Delta Tango Sierra. No one was paying attention. At the corner booth, Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell was holding court. He was 34 years old and built like a man who'd spent his life proving he was harder than everyone else. His neck was thick as a fence post, his arms corded with muscle and covered in tattoos that told their own stories. An eagle clutching an anchor on his right bicep, the Marine Corps emblem on his left shoulder, a faded purple heart on his forearm, the ink blurred at the edges like an old bruise. He'd just come back from Iraq. 12 months in Fallujah, where the streets smelled like cordite and burning trash, where every doorway might hide an insurgent with an AK-47, where you learn to sleep light and wake ready to kill. He wore his combat infantryman badge like a shield. He'd earned it in Nasiriyah during the initial push, when the war was still young and men still believed they were liberating something. His squad was with him. Corporal Danny Sullivan, all Irish temper and red hair from Boston, where loyalty was measured in blood. PFC Tyler Wilson, quiet and watchful from rural Tennessee, who joined because farming was dying and the Corps promised something better. PFC Chris Jackson, barely 23, who laughed too loud at Mitchell's jokes because he hadn't learned yet that sometimes silence was safer. Mitchell drained his beer and slammed the bottle down hard enough to rattle the table. I'm telling you, this new generation, they don't get it. Back in '91, we went into Kuwait, we kicked Saddam's ass in 100 hours. And we came home. Clean, surgical. That's how you fight a war. Sullivan nodded, but his eyes had drifted to the woman at the bar. Hey, Hammer, you see her? Mitchell followed his gaze. Kate Morrison sat perfectly still, her water untouched, her face empty of expression. Contractor, Mitchell said, loading the word with contempt. Probably pushing papers for some defense company. Making 6 figures to do what a private could do for 30 grand. She doesn't look like a paper pusher, Sullivan said. They never do. Mitchell stood, and the alcohol in his system gave him the kind of liquid courage that feels like confidence until the morning after. Watch this. He crossed the bar with the rolling swagger of a man who'd never been told no with any real consequence. He was Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell. He'd survived Nasiriyah. He'd pulled bodies out of burning vehicles. He'd fired his weapon in anger and watched men die. He was a warrior, and this woman, this anonymous civilian in her contractor clothes, she was nothing. He stopped beside her stool, leaning an elbow on the bar, crowding her space in a way that was calculated to intimidate. "You look thirsty," he said. His voice was rough, abraded by desert sand and cigarette smoke. "Let me buy you a real drink, something that ain't water." Kate turned her head slowly. Her eyes, when they met his, were dark and completely flat. No fear, no interest, no anything. "I'm fine, thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. Midwestern neutral, carefully stripped of regional markers. The rejection bounced off him like rain off armor. He grinned, showing teeth. "Don't be like that. We're all on the same team out here, right?" "What do you do? Logistics, supply chain management?" He gestured vaguely with his bottle. "Whatever it is, you look like you could use some fun." "I'm waiting for my transport," she said, turning back to her water. The dismissal was absolute. This was a mistake. Her disinterest was gasoline on the small fire of his ego. One of his buddies, Jackson, called out from the booth. "Yo, Hammer, she turning you down. A paper pusher turning down a Marine." The bar had gotten quieter. People were watching now. Mitchell felt the weight of their eyes, felt his face getting hot. He'd been staff sergeant at 28 youngest in his battalion. He'd been recommended for force recon twice. Twice he'd been passed over. Danny Sullivan, his friend, his brother-in-arms, had just gotten his acceptance letter. And here was Jake Mitchell, stuck in a regular infantry unit, drinking at a desert bar, while civilian contractors made more in a month than he made in a year. And this woman, this nobody, was looking at him like he was invisible. "Look," he said, and the friendly pretense was gone from his voice, now replaced by something colder. "I'm trying to be nice here. A little respect is all I'm asking. Out here, we protect people like you." He jabbed a finger toward his chest, toward the CIB pinned over his heart. "I earned my stripes in Kuwait. Desert Storm. You know what that means. It means I bled for this country while you were probably in college learning about supply chains." Kate's gaze remained fixed on the warped mirror behind the bar, where the distorted reflection of the room played out like a funhouse nightmare. "Your service is noted, Sergeant. Now please step back." The finality in her tone cut through his drunken haze, but it only sharpened his anger into something more dangerous. His face darkened. The mask of drunken friendliness was completely gone now, replaced by pure, brutish pride wounded past the point of reason. "You think you're better than me?" he said, his voice dropping to a growl that silenced the nearby tables. "You're just another civilian tourist. We're the ones with boots in the dirt, the ones who bleed. You sit in your air-conditioned office and shuffle papers. You wouldn't last 5 seconds outside the wire without men like me." She finally met his eyes again. There was still no fear in them. There was nothing. It was like looking into the flat black lens of a camera. That unnerving calm was more infuriating than any retort could have been. He felt a surge of hot, reckless fury. His ego, bruised in front of his men, in front of the whole bar, demanded a physical response. He reached out not to grab her arm, but to assert dominance, to put her in her place. He shoved her shoulder. Hard. It wasn't a playful push. It was a blow meant to unseat her, to humiliate her, to make her understand who had power here and who didn't. The impact was solid. Kate rocked on the stool. One foot slid on the grimy floor as she caught her balance. She didn't cry out. She didn't gasp. She absorbed the force, her body moving with it in a way that seemed to dissipate the energy like water flowing around a stone. She straightened. Her gray t-shirt was slightly askew. She looked at the spot on her shoulder where he'd struck her, then back at his furious face. Her expression remained unchanged, a blank slate of unnerving composure. For a fleeting second, something ancient and dangerous passed through her eyes. A predator's assessment, cold and calculating, before being suppressed and locked away. She slid off the stool. Her movements were fluid, deliberate. She placed 5 crumpled dollar bills on the bar to cover her water, her hands completely steady. Without another word, without a single glance at Mitchell or his stunned friends, she walked toward the exit. The path she took was direct. Her steps were even. The bar patrons, who had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, watched her go. There was something wrong about the way she moved, too balanced, too aware. Like someone who'd spent years learning how to walk through hostile territory without making a sound. Mitchell stood there, fists still half-clenched, breathing heavily. He'd won. He'd put the arrogant civilian in her place. She'd left without a word. Victory. But the silence she left behind felt less like triumph and more like the deafening quiet before a storm breaks. He felt a strange, unsettling chill crawling up his spine, a feeling he couldn't name. He'd hit her, and her reaction wasn't fear or anger. It was nothing, and that nothing felt like the most insulting response of all. Behind the bar, Master Sergeant Roy Hicks, 65 years old, retired Navy SEAL, watched Kate Morrison walk out. He'd seen a lot of people move through his bar over the years. Drunk Marines, scared privates, officers pretending they weren't carrying the weight of command. But what he'd just seen made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The way she'd absorbed that push, the angle of her feet, the controlled breathing, the assessment in her eyes before she'd locked it down. He'd seen that before. Once. In 1993 in Somalia, when a female intelligence officer attached to his SEAL team had moved through the Mogadishu market like a ghost reading threats in the crowd before they materialized. Mitchell turned back to his friends, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "See, told you. All talk, these contractors." But his voice lacked conviction. Hicks caught his eye. The old SEAL's face was grim. "Son," he said quietly, "you just fucked up bad." Mitchell bristled. "She's a contractor." "That ain't no contractor." Hicks wiped down the bar with slow, deliberate strokes. "I've seen operators before. Real ones. That's a goddamn ghost." Mitchell wanted to argue, but something in Hicks's voice, in his eyes that had seen things in jungles and deserts that most men only had nightmares about, made him hesitate. He turned back to his beer, but the taste had gone sour and the victory felt increasingly hollow. Outside in the parking lot, bathed in harsh sodium lights, Kate Morrison stood beside a dusty pickup truck and closed her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to let the suppressed rage filter through her system like poison being processed by a liver. She wanted to go back inside. She wanted to show Jake Mitchell what a real operator looked like when the leash came off. She wanted to break his nose, his wrist, his knee in that order, and explain to him very carefully why hitting a woman was a mistake he would never make again. But she couldn't, because Kate Morrison logistics contractor GS-11 equivalent would never do that. Kate Morrison was nobody. Kate Morrison was invisible, and the phantom needed to stay buried for 72 more hours. She took a long breath, released it slowly, opened her eyes. A voice behind her, "You okay?" She turned. A woman in Air Force fatigues. Master Sergeant stripes on her sleeves, 40-ish, with the kind of weathered face that comes from years of dealing with problems, while everyone above you pretends they don't exist. "I'm fine," Kate said. The woman studied her for a moment. "That was Mitchell. He's usually not that bad, usually." She paused. "If you need anything, I'm Senior Master Sergeant Davis. Security Forces. I can file a report." Kate almost smiled, almost. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm fine." Davis nodded slowly, but her eyes said she didn't quite believe it. "Offer stands." She started to turn away, then stopped. "Hey, where'd you learn to move like that?" Kate's expression didn't change. "Like what? Like someone who knows what they're doing." "I don't know what you mean." Davis held her gaze for another beat, then nodded. "Right, well, take care of yourself out there." She walked back toward the base. Kate watched her go, filing the interaction away. Davis was sharp. Davis was dangerous in the way that smart people were dangerous. That would need to be remembered. Kate climbed into the truck and sat in the darkness for a moment, her hands on the wheel. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light. Engraved on the inside, too small for anyone else to read, Mogadishu 93. She touched it once, a brief gesture, almost a prayer. Then she started the engine and drove back toward Fort Sentinel, where tomorrow morning she had an appointment with Colonel Carver that would go exactly as badly as she expected. The summons arrived at 0600 hours. A crisp, formal order delivered to her quarters by a stone-faced corporal. Report to Colonel Carver's office, 0900 hours, dressed professional. Kate had been awake since 0430. She ran 5 miles through the desert. Darkness did 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, and 100 pull-ups on the bar she'd installed in her doorway. Then she showered, dressed in civilian professional clothes, khaki pants, white blouse, her hair in the same severe bun, and waited. Mitchell would be there, she knew that. He would have filed a report, or someone would have filed one for him, and now the machinery of military justice would grind through its motions before arriving at the conclusion That was inevitable from the start. At 08:55 hours, she walked across the base toward the command building. Fort Sentinel looked like every forward operating base she'd ever seen, prefabricated metal buildings baking under a merciless sun, concertina wire perimeter guard towers with board sentries scanning empty desert, the flag snapping in the hot wind, the constant low hum of generators and air conditioning units fighting a losing battle against the heat. The command building was different, older, permanent. It had been built during the Cold War, back when America was staring down the Soviets, and every military installation was built to last. The walls were thick concrete. The air conditioning actually worked. Inside it smelled like floor wax and old coffee, and the particular staleness of recycled air that never quite touched the outside world. Colonel William Carver's office was on the second floor. The door was oak, real oak, not veneer, a relic from when the military had budget and ambition in equal measure. Mitchell was already there standing at parade rest outside the door. He was in his dress blues, his uniform immaculate, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. He looked like a recruiting poster. He looked like everything America thought a Marine should be. When he saw Kate approaching, his face hardened. He gave her a look that was pure contempt, a silent reminder of his dominance, his victory. She was nothing. He was a warrior. Kate didn't acknowledge him. She simply stood on the opposite side of the door and waited. At exactly 0900 hours, the door opened. A young lieutenant, Carver's aide, gestured them inside. The office was a shrine to military history. The walls were covered in framed photographs and citations. Kate noticed that immediately. Grenada 1983 young men storming a beach, the urgent fury operation that had restored America's confidence after years of doubt. Panama 1989 night jumps and precision strikes during Operation Just Cause. Desert Storm 1991 tanks rolling through desert, the highway of death. The 100-hour war that made heroes. Behind the desk sat Colonel William Carver, 58 years old, 2 years from retirement. His face was a topographical map of sun damage and stress, his hair steel gray and cut high and tight. His eyes were pale blue, faded like old denim, but still sharp. On his desk, a coffee mug from the 75th Ranger Regiment, a photo of a younger Carver in Panama rifle in hand, a plaque commemorating his service during Desert Storm. He gestured to the 2 chairs in front of his desk. Sit. They sat. Mitchell's posture was perfect. Kate's was neutral, hands folded in her lap. Carver picked up a file, opened it, scanned the contents with the kind of practiced disinterest that comes from reading too many incident reports. I have a report, he said, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth, of an incident at a local establishment last night, an altercation between a United States Marine and a civilian contractor. He looked up. His eyes went to Mitchell first. Always Mitchell first. Sergeant Mitchell, your report. Mitchell snapped to rigid attention even though he was sitting. Sir, last night approximately 2100 hours, my fire team and I were on authorized liberty at the Scorpion's Tail. The contractor, he nodded curtly toward Kate, not using her name, was present. She was acting disrespectfully, sir. Disrespectfully to the uniform, to the service members present. Carver's expression didn't change. Define disrespectful. She refused to engage in normal social interaction, sir. When I attempted to include her to bridge the civilian-military divide, she became belligerent. Mitchell's voice was steady, rehearsed. He'd practiced this. I may have made incidental contact while gesturing, sir, but there was no assault. I was attempting to de-escalate a situation that she had created through her hostile attitude towards service members. It was a masterclass in sanitized truth, every word carefully chosen, every phrase defensible. He was a decorated sergeant of Marines. She was a no-name paper pusher. He knew who the colonel would believe. Carver's gaze shifted to Kate. Miss Morrison, your version. Kate's voice was quiet but clear. He was intoxicated. He approached me. I declined his offer to buy me a drink. He didn't accept the refusal. He became aggressive. He pushed me. I left. Sparse, factual, devoid of emotion. She offered no embellishment, no plea for justice, just the facts delivered in a tone that suggested she expected nothing to come of them. Carver steepled his fingers. His expression was one of profound weariness, like a man who'd seen this exact scenario play out 1,000 times and was tired of pretending the outcome would ever be different. He looked at Kate, and in his eyes was the dismissive appraisal of a man who had already made his decision before the meeting started. He saw a liability, a civilian unaccustomed to the rough culture of a forward-deployed military base, a potential source of paperwork and headaches, someone who didn't understand how things worked out here. Miss Morrison, Carver said, his voice dropping into the patronizing lecture of a man explaining simple things to someone he considered simple. This is not some corporate campus back in Virginia. This is Fort Sentinel. This is a forward operating base in a training environment. The men here are under incredible stress. They've seen combat. They've bled for this country. He gestured toward Mitchell without looking at him. These are warriors. There is a certain culture here. A certain amount of friction is to be expected when you mix combat veterans with civilian personnel. He leaned forward. I fought in Grenada in 1980. I was there when we took Point Selene's airport. I was there when Marines died securing that beach so that American medical students could come home safe. I understand what these men go through. I understand what it means to serve. The implication was clear. And you don't. You need to understand that and adapt to it, Carver continued. Frankly, your presence here is a privilege, not a right. You're here because the Department of Defense needs logistics support, but that doesn't mean you get to dictate the terms of your interactions with service members. He paused, letting that sink in. One more incident, one more report crossing my desk with your name on it for any reason, and your contract will be terminated. You'll be on the next transport plane back to the States. Am I clear? He didn't ask for her side again. He didn't question Mitchell's story. He didn't acknowledge that a staff sergeant had put his hands on a woman half his size in anger. The case was closed before it had opened. Mitchell stood a little taller. The corner of his mouth twitched in a triumphant smirk. He had been vindicated. He was the warrior. She was the problem. Kate held the colonel's gaze. Her face remained a mask of polite neutrality, professional and empty. Yes, Colonel, I understand. Good, Carver grunted. He turned his attention to Mitchell, and his voice hardened slightly. Not much, just enough to maintain the appearance of fairness. Sergeant Mitchell, you and your men are confined to base for 72 hours. Consider it a cooling off period. I don't want to see your face off this installation again until the weekend. I don't want another incident. Am I clear? Mitchell snapped a crisp salute. Yes, sir. A slap on the wrist, a weekend restriction. The price of putting your hands on a woman in anger delivered by a colonel who'd already decided the woman was the real problem. Dismissed, Carver said. Mitchell turned and walked toward the door. As he passed Kate, he shot her a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. You're nothing. I proved it. Kate simply nodded to the colonel, a gesture of acquiescence that promised nothing and revealed nothing, and walked out. She didn't look back as she stepped out of the command building into the blinding New Mexico sun. The heat hit her like a physical blow, but she kept her composure, her posture, her carefully constructed mask of civilian indifference. She had been reprimanded, dismissed, and threatened by the highest authority on the base. Her assailant had been given a slap on the wrist. It was unjust. It was infuriating. It was exactly what she'd expected. She filed it away, another data point in a vast internal ledger. She had a mission to focus on. The colonel's opinion, the sergeant's arrogance, they were irrelevant noise. They saw a logistics analyst. They saw a woman who didn't know her place. They saw a victim. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see. In the parking lot, a pickup truck was waiting. Behind the wheel sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from desert hardpan and left in the sun to cure. Chief Warrant Officer Frank Stone, retired, officially. He was 52 years old, but he moved like someone 20 years younger and thought like someone who'd seen 20 lifetimes of bad decisions. His hair was gray at the temples, his beard full and shot through with silver. His eyes were the pale green of old jade, and they missed nothing. Kate climbed into the passenger seat without a word. Stone handed her a bottle of water. She took it, drank half in one pull. That bad? He asked. His voice was gravel and whiskey roughened by years of shouting over helicopter rotors and gunfire. Carver sided with Mitchell, threatened to terminate my contract if there's another incident. Stone nodded slowly. He'd expected that too. Carver's old school. He came up through Grenada and Panama. He sees a woman contractor, and he sees a problem he doesn't need. I could have handled Mitchell, Kate said quietly. I know you could have. But Kate Morrison, logistics analyst, couldn't. And that's who you are for 72 more hours. He reached into the center console and pulled out an encrypted phone, the kind that looked like a regular smartphone, but was anything but. He handed it to Kate. The screen showed a single text message, asset confirmed. Codename Viper, embedded as Allied Liaison. ETA 18:00 tonight. Kate read it twice, committing every detail to memory, then deleted it. He's really coming. He's really coming. And when he does, we have 72 hours to determine if he's our mole or just a very unlucky Iraqi officer. Stone pulled the truck out of the parking lot, heading toward the logistics compound on the far side of the base. Mission first, Kate. Your ego can take a hit. It's not my ego I'm worried about. I know. He glanced at her. This reminds me of Panama '89. We had a mole in the Noriega government. Double agent playing both sides. Took us 6 months to flush him out. You've done it in 8 weeks. That's why you're the best. Kate touched the bracelet on her wrist. Mogadishu 93. My father used to say the best operators are the ones nobody notices. Stone's expression softened just for a moment. James Morrison was the best man I ever knew, and he'd be proud as hell of you right now. They drove in silence for a while. The base rolled past a collection of buildings and vehicles, and personnel going about their daily routines completely unaware that somewhere among them was a traitor who'd gotten 43 American servicemen killed over the past 8 months. You think Mitchell's going to be a problem? Stone asked. No, he thinks he won. He'll stay away from me. And Carver's 2 years from retirement and terrified of anything that might derail his pension. I'm a threat to his stability. He'll ignore me unless I force him not to. Stone nodded. Good. Stay invisible. Stay boring. In 72 hours, Viper either runs talks or dies. After that, you're done here. And then the Phantom yo's back to being a ghost. He pulled up outside Kate's quarters, a converted shipping container that had been outfitted with a cot, a desk, a laptop, and not much else. It was Spartan. It was anonymous. It was perfect. Kate got out, then leaned back in through the window. Frank, thank you for everything. Stone's face was grim. Save it for when the job's done. We're not clear yet. She nodded and walked inside, closing the door behind her. Inside her quarters, Kate sat at her desk and powered up the laptop. The screen showed logistics manifests, shipping schedules, inventory reports. Boring, bureaucratic, exactly what a GS-11 contractor would be working on. She clicked through to a hidden partition, entered a 16-character password, and the screen changed. Now it showed something else entirely: satellite imagery, encrypted communication intercepts, personnel files, pattern analysis. For 8 weeks, she'd been tracking Major Khalid al-Rashid. On paper, he was an Iraqi Army liaison officer assigned to Fort Sentinel for advanced training. In reality, he was something else. The question was what. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. Khalid had been present at 3 bases where operational plans had been compromised. Communications intercepts suggested he was using a burst transmitter to send encrypted data packets, probably to a handler in Iran. The timing of his transmissions correlated with 8 separate ambushes in Anbar province that had killed 43 American soldiers. But they needed proof. They needed him caught in the act, or they needed him to run. And they needed it before he disappeared into the vast network of Iraqi expatriates and intelligence assets scattered across the Middle East. Kate pulled up his file. The photo showed a man in his early 40s, handsome in a rough way, with careful eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. His background claimed he'd been an Iraqi army captain during the initial invasion, had surrendered at Al-Qut, had been vetted and cleared for cooperation. But Kate had spent years learning to read the details that files left out. And there were details here that didn't add up. She zoomed in on the photo, studying his hands. Calluses in the wrong places for a regular army officer. Too much hand-to-hand training. The kind of conditioning that came from Russian or Iranian special operations schools, not Iraqi military academies. His watch in one photo, an Omega Seamaster, $8,000 new. Iraqi army salary, $400 a month. He'd been wearing that watch for at least 3 years based on the wear pattern. A knock on her door. Kate closed the laptop instantly. the screen reverting to boring logistics data. Come in. Senior Master Sergeant Davis stepped inside, her face neutral, but her eyes sharp. Miss Morrison, just wanted to check in. Make sure you were settling in okay after this morning. Kate kept her expression professional. I'm fine, Sergeant. Thank you for asking. Davis nodded slowly, but she was looking around the room, taking in the Spartan accommodations, the lack of personal touches, the carefully maintained anonymity. You know, I've been on this base for 3 years, seen a lot of contractors come and go. Most of them, they bring pictures of their families, their pets. They make it home. I prefer to keep work and personal separate. Right. Davis took a step closer. I was security forces in Iraq, 3 tours. You know what I learned? The people who keep the strictest separation between work and personal. They're either running from something or running towards something. Which one are you? Kate met her eyes. I'm not running anywhere, Sergeant. I'm just doing my job. Davis held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fair enough, but my offer stands. If you need anything, you let me know. Women look out for each other out here, even if we can't always say why. I appreciate that. Davis turned to leave, then stopped at the door. One more thing. That Morse code you were tapping at the bar last night. DTS. You know, my husband was a comms specialist. He taught me Morse when we were dating. Said it was romantic. She smiled faintly. What's DTS stand for? Kate's expression didn't flicker. I don't know what you mean. Right, sure you don't. Davis opened the door. Take care of yourself, Miss Morrison. This base has a way of chewing people up if they're not careful. She left. Kate sat very still, replaying the conversation. Davis was smart. Davis was observant. Davis was exactly the kind of person who could blow an operation wide open just by asking the right questions at the wrong time. She made a mental note, Davis. Potential threat. Monitor. The rest of the day passed in a fog of carefully maintained boredom. Kate attended meetings about supply chain logistics. She reviewed shipping manifests. She answered emails about requisition forms. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a mid-level government contractor, earning a decent salary to keep the military machine running smoothly. And all the while she waited. At 1800 hours exactly as scheduled, Major Khalid al-Rashid arrived at Fort Sentinel. Kate watched from a distance as his vehicle, a white SUV with diplomatic plates, pulled up to the command building. He stepped out dressed in civilian clothes, khakis, and a pressed button-down shirt, and moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged. Colonel Carver himself came out to greet him, shaking hands, smiling. 2 officers flanked Khalid, making small talk, gesturing toward the officers' quarters where he'd be staying. Kate raised a small pair of binoculars, watching his hands, his gait, his movements. Everything about him screamed training. The way he scanned his surroundings. The way his hand unconsciously checked his left side where a weapon would be holstered. The slight favor of his right leg, consistent with an old injury. She lowered the binoculars and pulled out her encrypted phone, typed a single message to Stone Viper is in the nest. The reply came back instantly. Do not engage, observe only. Extraction team on standby if he runs. Kate pocketed the phone and walked back to her quarters. 72 hours. That's all they had. 72 hours to catch a mole who'd been smart enough to evade detection for 8 months, cautious enough to stay clean, connected enough to have diplomatic cover. Her encrypted phone buzzed again. Another message from Stone, this one marked Flash Priority. She opened it, read it twice. Her blood went cold. Langley confirms facial recognition. Subject is not Khalid al-Rashid. True identity, Hassan al-Malik, former Iraqi Republican Guard Fedayeen Saddam. Trained GRU facility Chechnya, 1998-2001. Expert in intelligence tradecraft and infiltration. Wanted for war crimes, Halabja, 1988. He's not a defector, Kate. He's an assassin. Kate stared at the screen. The man Colonel Carver had just welcomed with a handshake. The man who would be sleeping in officers' quarters 50 yards from the TOC wasn't an ally. He was a weapon, and he was aimed directly at the heart of Fort Sentinel. She typed back, does Carver know? Stone's reply was immediate, negative. And we can't tell him. If al-Malik suspects we're onto him, he'll vanish. You're our only play. 72 hours ghost, observe and report. Do not engage unless he runs. Kate deleted the messages and pocketed the phone. 72 hours to watch a killer who'd gotten 43 Americans murdered. 72 hours to play the helpless contractor while a wolf walked free among the sheep. 72 hours before the mission window closed and Khalid al-Rashid disappeared into the wind. Kate Morrison, logistics analyst, filed paperwork and tried not to think about how badly she wanted to put a bullet in a traitor's skull. But the phantom, the operator who lived in the shadows behind Kate's eyes, was already counting down, already planning, already preparing for the moment when the mask would come off and the ghost would be allowed to hunt. 72 hours. The clock was ticking. The attack came 72 hours later at exactly 14:27 hours on a Thursday afternoon when the sun hung like a white-hot coin in a bleached sky and the desert air shimmered with heat that made distant objects waver like mirages. Kate Morrison was in the base gym, a converted warehouse that smelled like rubber mats and old sweat and the metallic tang of iron weights. She was alone. Most personnel avoided the gym during the heat of the day, preferring to work out in the early morning or late evening when the temperature dropped below unbearable. She preferred it this way. Alone meant no questions, no eyes tracking her movements, no one wondering why a logistics contractor could do 20 pull-ups without breaking a sweat, or why her footwork during rope climbs looked like something taught in special operations schools. She was midway through her third set of tire flips, the massive rubber tractor tire leaving sweat prints on the concrete each time she heaved it over, when Corporal Danny Sullivan walked past the open bay door. He stopped, stared. His expression shifted from casual disinterest to something else. Confusion, suspicion. Contractors didn't train like that. Contractors didn't move with that kind of controlled violence, that kind of purpose. Their eyes met for a brief second. Kate kept her face neutral, betraying nothing. Sullivan nodded slowly like a man filing away information he didn't quite understand and kept walking. She made a mental note. Another person asking silent questions. Another potential complication. She was reaching for the tire again when the lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed, went completely black in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The gym's industrial fans died mid-rotation. The hum of the air conditioning, that constant background noise that every building on base generated, simply stopped. In the sudden silence, Kate could hear her own breathing, could hear the distant, confused voices of personnel stepping out of buildings wondering what happened. She counted in her head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The backup generators should have kicked in by now. Standard military protocol. Primary power fails, diesel backups engage within 5 seconds. But there was nothing, just silence, and the oppressive heat already starting to build. Kate moved to the gym entrance, her eyes adjusting to the bright sunlight outside. Across the base, she could see soldiers and airmen emerging from buildings, looking around in confusion. No power anywhere, total blackout. This wasn't a simple failure, this was deliberate. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Primary generators offline meant someone had sabotaged the fuel lines or the control systems. Backup generators not engaging meant the same sabotage executed simultaneously. That required inside knowledge. That required planning. Then she heard it, a series of dull percussive thumps from the direction of the western perimeter. Not the loud crack of IEDs or mortars. Something else. Something quieter but far more professional. Suppressed heavy-caliber rifle fire. Disciplined. Controlled. The sound of operators executing a planned assault. Kate's entire body shifted. The civilian contractor posture fell away like a discarded coat. Her shoulders squared. Her stance widened. Her eyes, which had been carefully maintaining the mild expression of someone moderately concerned, now turned cold and calculating. From the direction of the main gate, a massive explosion. The ground shook. A column of black smoke billowed into the sky, thick and oily. Car bomb or shaped charge. Big. Designed to draw attention, pull resources, create chaos. The base sirens finally screamed to life, powered by independent battery systems. The wailing filled the air, a sound designed to trigger instant panic to send personnel scrambling for weapons and cover. Kate watched the smoke rising from the main gate. Classic diversion. The real attack would be somewhere else. She thought about the western perimeter, those suppressed shots. The section of fence line that she'd identified during her surveillance, the blind spot obscured by a shallow wadi, the place where someone with inside knowledge would breach if they wanted to infiltrate undetected. Viper had given them the blueprint. He'd sold them Fort Sentinel's vulnerabilities, and now they were exploiting every single one. She sprinted toward her quarters, her movements no longer those of a cautious civilian, but of someone who'd spent years learning how to move fast in hostile territory. She covered the 100 yards in under 15 seconds. Inside, she grabbed the go bag she kept under her cot, opened it. Inside, trauma kit tactical gloves, encrypted radio extra magazines for weapons she wasn't supposed to have. She strapped on the gloves, clipped the radio to her belt, and ran back out. She needed a weapon. The armory was on the far side of the base, impossible to reach. But Fort Sentinel had armed security forces patrols, and, in chaos, opportunity. She ran toward the sound of gunfire toward the western perimeter where the real fight was happening while everyone else was rushing toward the smoke and noise at the main gate. The bodies started appearing 50 yards from the perimeter. An airman in security forces fatigues lay sprawled beside his patrol vehicle, his M4 rifle on the ground beside him. Kate dropped to one knee, pressed two fingers to his neck. No pulse, the body was still warm. He'd been dead less than 2 minutes. She looked at his face. Young, maybe 24. Slack with the kind of surprise that comes when death arrives faster than recognition. His name tape read Bennett. Sarah Michael Bennett from Ohio, who'd probably joined the Air Force to pay for college and see the world, and never imagined he'd die in a desert in New Mexico during what was supposed to be a routine training assignment. Kate closed his eyes gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she took his rifle. The M4A1 felt like coming home. The weight of it, the balance, the familiar arrangement of controls. She checked the chamber automatically, years of muscle memory taking over. Round chambered, magazine seated, bolt forward, safety on, by the book. She took his remaining magazines, 4 of them, 30 rounds each. 120 rounds total. It would have to be enough. She took his radio, clipping it to her belt beside her encrypted phone. The radio was alive with panicked transmissions, voices talking over each other, units trying to coordinate while their communications infrastructure fell apart. Multiple breaches, Sector Charlie 4. We need backup. We need. QRF is pinned at the main gate. They can't move, heavy machine gun fire. TOC, this is Delta 7. We have casualties. We need. All units, this is Toki. We have lost satellite comms. We are operating on tactical. Net only acknowledge. The chaos in those voices told Kate everything she needed to know. Fort Sentinel's command and control had been decapitated. The attackers had done exactly what she would have done, cut the head off first blind. The leadership let the body thrash around uselessly while you executed your real objective. And what was their real objective? The TOC, the Tactical Operations Center, where Colonel Carver and his staff were probably right now trying desperately to coordinate a defense with half their systems down and no clear picture of what they were facing. Where Viper was probably right now having maneuvered himself into exactly the right position to complete his mission. Kate started moving, not toward the TOC yet. First, she needed to see what she was dealing with. She used the maintenance corridors between buildings, the service alleys that she'd mapped during her 2 months on base. Places where someone who knew the layout could move unseen, could observe without being observed. She reached the corner of a supply warehouse and carefully looked around the edge. 50 yards away, 2 figures in black tactical gear were advancing down the main road using professional bounding overwatch. One would move, while the other covered, then they'd switch. Textbook small unit tactics. Their weapons were Galil Ace rifles. Israeli manufacture, expensive, not the kind of thing insurgents carried. These were professionals, mercenaries or special operations from a nation-state that wanted deniability. Kate watched their pattern. Predictable, efficient, but predictable was exploitable. She slipped into the shadow of a large generator, housing the metal still radiating stored heat from running all morning. She waited, counted their rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. The lead man passed her position, focused forward, his partner 40 feet behind providing overwatch. Kate moved like smoke. Her left hand clamped over the lead man's mouth before he could shout. Her right hand, still holding the M4, drove the rifle's stock into the side of his head, just behind the ear, the occipital bone where the skull is thinnest. The sound was a wet crack that she felt through the weapon. He went limp. She lowered him to the ground silently, smoothly, already moving toward the second man. The partner had seen his point man disappear. His weapon came up, confusion turning to alarm. He opened his mouth to shout. Kate was already kneeling, the M4 braced against the generator, housing her breathing slow and controlled. The red dot sight found his head. She didn't aim for center mass. Center mass meant body armor, meant a chance he'd survive long enough to return fire. She aimed for the head. One shot, the suppressed crack was loud in the relative quiet of the service alley, but not loud enough to carry far. The man's head snapped back. He crumpled like someone had cut his strings. Kate was already moving low and fast, reaching the body. She took his radio, listened to the chatter. Foreign language mix of Arabic and Farsi. Professional military terminology. Iranian intelligence services probably. Or Syrian mercenaries working for them. One voice more urgent than the others. Sector 7 team not responding. Mahmoud and Hassan are off comms. Another voice older with command authority. Ghost protocols. Could it be impossible? Ghost is a myth. Americans don't have operators here. Then who killed them? Kate allowed herself the ghost of a smile. They knew about the phantom. They'd come prepared for the possibility. But preparation and reality were very different things. She continued through the base, moving from cover to cover, reading the tactical situation like a book written in blood and cordite. The attackers had sent 3 teams, one to the main gate as a diversion, one to the TOC to capture or kill leadership, and one to the western perimeter to provide an escape route and prevent reinforcements from reaching the center of the base. Smart, professional. It would have worked against a conventional defense. But Kate Morrison wasn't conventional. She reached a vantage point on top of a supply warehouse, climbing an external maintenance ladder with the M4 slung across her back. From here, she could see a large section of the base. The tactical picture became clear. At the main gate, she could see muzzle flashes. The quick reaction force, the base's emergency response team, was pinned down by a heavy machine gun firing from somewhere in the smoke and chaos. They couldn't advance. They couldn't retreat. They were combat ineffective. Closer to her position, she spotted movement near the motor pool. A fire team, 4 men moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of hundreds of hours of training together. And there, 200 yards away, near the administration building adjacent to the TOC, she saw what made her blood go cold. Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell and his squad were caught in the open, pinned behind a Humvee. She could see them clearly through her rifle's optic. Mitchell firing controlled bursts, trying to suppress an enemy position. Corporal Sullivan working frantically on someone who was down, blood visible even from this distance. PFC Wilson returning fire, his movements jerky with adrenaline and fear. They were trapped, and the weapon that had them pinned was a PKM machine gun on the roof of the admin building, a Russian-made belt-fed monster that could chew through soft cover like paper. The gunner was good. Every time Mitchell's squad tried to move, the PKM would roar to life, kicking up dust and concrete fragments, forcing them back down. Kate watched, calculated. She had choices here. She could leave them. Mitchell was an asshole who'd assaulted her and gotten away with it. Carver had sided against her. They'd made it clear she was unwelcome, unimportant, disposable. She could let them die and complete her mission. The mission was what mattered. The mission was everything. But she watched Mitchell trying to cover his wounded man. Watched Sullivan desperately applying a tourniquet. Watched these Marines fighting for their lives, and she made a different calculation. The mission was to protect Americans. That was the mission, not to protect Americans she liked, or Americans who treated her well, or Americans who deserved it. All Americans, even assholes like Jake Mitchell. She studied the admin building. The PKM gunner was focused on Mitchell's position, his attention completely fixed on maintaining suppression. He had 2 feeders with him loading ammunition belts, watching his sectors. Kate marked the distance, 340 meters. The M4's effective range was 500 meters, but accuracy dropped significantly past 300. And she needed accuracy. She needed to get closer. There was a fire escape on the back of the admin building, hidden from the gunner's line of sight. If she could reach it without being spotted, she could climb to the roof and take them from behind. Big if. She climbed down from the warehouse, moved through another maintenance corridor, crossed an open space at a dead sprint, and reached the base of the admin building. Her heart was hammering now, adrenaline flooding her system, but her hands were steady. The fire escape was old steel, the paint peeling the metal hot enough to burn. She started climbing, fast but controlled, each step placed deliberately to minimize noise. She was halfway up when she heard shouting below. She looked down. Two attackers had spotted her. They were raising their weapons, shouting in Arabic. Kate didn't hesitate. She kept climbing. Bullets sparked off the metal railing, the whine of ricochets loud in her ears. One round passed so close to her head she felt the pressure wave. She reached the top of the ladder and rolled over the parapet onto the roof. The three men at the PKM were starting to turn, alerted by the gunfire, but they were still focused on Mitchell's position. Kate had maybe 3 seconds before they fully processed the new threat. She didn't waste time with precision. She grabbed the M67 fragmentation grenade from the vest of the dead airman, the one she'd taken along with the magazines. Pulled the pin, held it for a count, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, cooking the grenade, letting the fuse burn down so they couldn't throw it back. Then she threw it. The grenade arced through the air over the low parapet that protected the gunner position and landed in the center of the 3 men. Kate ducked below the roofline. The explosion was a flat, hard crack that she felt in her chest. Shrapnel whined overhead, embedding in the building's facade behind her. She came up fast, M4 at her shoulder. 3 shapes, all down. She fired twice at each, confirming kills. The PKM fell silent. The sudden absence of that terrible hammering fire was like a physical release. 200 yards away, Mitchell was staring up at the rooftop. Kate saw him clearly, saw the exact moment his brain processed what he was seeing. A small figure in civilian clothes, moving with professional precision, armed with a rifle that should have been on the body of a dead airman. His mouth fell open. Beside him, Sullivan grabbed his arm, pointing. "Who the hell is that?" Mitchell's voice, carried on the desert wind, reached her ears. "That's her, the contractor. The one I—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Kate didn't wait for him to process it. She was already moving, descending the fire escape on the opposite side of the building, continuing her advance toward the TOC. She'd bought Mitchell and his men time. What they did with it was up to them. Her mission was still out there. Viper was still at large, and the attack on Fort Sentinel wasn't over yet. Behind her, in the sudden quiet after the machine gun's death, Mitchell stood slowly from behind the Humvee. His mind was reeling, trying to reconcile what he'd just seen with everything he thought he knew. The woman from the bar, the contractor he'd pushed, humiliated, dismissed. She'd just executed a perfect tactical assault on a fortified position, eliminated 3 enemy combatants, and saved his entire squad. Sullivan was staring at him. "Hammer, what the hell was that?" "I don't know," Mitchell said. But he was lying. He did know. He'd just been too arrogant, too blinded by his own ego to see it before. Master Sergeant Hicks had tried to warn him. That ain't no contractor. That's a goddamn ghost. And he just watched the ghost go hunting. Kate reached the TOC's outer perimeter. The main entrance was a disaster. Bodies of defenders and attackers mixed together. The sandbagged fighting position that should have been a fortress had been overrun. She could see enemy combatants inside the building through the shattered windows. She heard voices, English and Arabic mixed together. Command voices, someone coordinating the final assault. And above it all, one voice in particular, Khalid al-Rashid, Major Viper, speaking in perfect, unaccented English. "Colonel, just tell us where the files are. Your honor isn't worth your life." Kate's encrypted phone buzzed. She pulled it out, keeping low behind a concrete barrier. A text from Stone Ghost sitrep. She typed back quickly. 5 hostiles, down Western approach clear. Viper is with attackers inside TOC. They're trying to extract intelligence files. Stone's reply came back immediately. "I'm inbound, stacking at north entrance." Kate looked at the building. The front entrance was suicide. The windows were covered. But there was another way. She typed HVAC duct server room entry. "Stone, I taught you that trick in '04. Kate, you taught me everything, old man." A pause. "Then your father would be proud." Kate stared at that message, felt something tight in her chest, something she couldn't afford to feel right now. She forced it down, locked it away. She typed, "Copy that, Reaper." Going dark. Then she found the HVAC intake vent on the backside of the TOC. 4 bolts held it in place. She used the multi-tool she'd been carrying, the one every good operator kept on them, and had the grill off in 30 seconds. The duct was narrow, dark, and hot as an oven. She pushed the M4 ahead of her and crawled inside, moving on elbows and knees, silent as a snake. It took 3 minutes to reach the server room. 3 minutes of claustrophobic darkness, of breathing recycled air that tasted like dust and heat, of forcing herself not to think about what would happen if someone spotted her, if they fired into the duct, if she got stuck. But she didn't get stuck. She reached the grill above the server room, looked down through the slats. Empty. The servers hummed quietly, their lights blinking in the darkness, oblivious to the violence happening one room away. Kate pushed the grill aside and dropped silently to the floor, landing in a crouch. She had the M4 up and ready before her knees fully flexed. She could hear them in the next room. Viper's voice calm and professional. Carver's voice defiant but weakening. The colonel had been hit. She could hear it in his breathing. Someone else spoke, a voice she didn't recognize, deep with a Syrian accent. "Colonel, we don't have time for this. The ghost is out there. We lost 9 men to her already. If we don't get those files and leave now, we're all dead." Kate felt a cold satisfaction. They were scared. Good. They should be. She moved to the door connecting the server room to the main operations center, tested it gently, unlocked. She could see through the crack. 6 attackers, 7 hostages, including Carver, all lined up against the far wall. Viper stood in the center of the room, his back to Kate, a pistol in his hand. And at the door on the opposite side of the room, she caught a flicker of movement. Stone, stacking up for a breach, waiting for her signal. Kate did the math in her head. 6 targets, 7 hostages, 40-foot room, 12 seconds, maybe 15 from first shot to last. The window between success and catastrophe was razor thin. She caught Stone's eye through the door window, raised her hand, counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. On 0, everything happened at once. Stone breached the north door with a flashbang. The world turned white and deaf. Kate came through the server room door firing. Not spraying, each shot was a distinct, calculated decision. Target priority, hostage guards, first, command last. The guard on the left, 2 shots, both to the head. His body armor was irrelevant. He dropped. Pivot, the guard on the right, 2 shots, same result. The hostage guard and the senator. 1 shot to the throat where armor didn't cover. He went down choking. 5 rounds expended, 115 remaining. 3 targets left. Viper was spinning fast, his pistol coming up. His shots went wild, panic overriding training. 1 round passed close enough to Kate that she felt the air displacement. Another grazed her left forearm, a burning line of pain that she ignored. She closed the distance, got inside his weapon's effective range, grabbed his wrist with her left hand twisted. His bones snapped with a sound like dry wood breaking. The pistol clattered to the floor. He screamed. The sound was high and disbelieving. "You're the Phantom, impossible." Kate's voice was flat, cold, empty of everything except purpose. Believe it. She drove her knee into his solar plexus. He doubled over, the air exploding from his lungs. She brought the edge of her hand down on the back of his neck, pulling the blow just enough to render him unconscious instead of killing him. He collapsed. Kate was already moving, clearing the remaining threats. But Stone was faster. The other 2 attackers were already down. Stone standing over them, his MK-18 still tracking for additional targets. The entire engagement had lasted 7 seconds. The hostages stared at Kate with expressions that ranged from shock to terror to something approaching religious awe. They just watched a woman in civilian clothes execute a room-clearing operation that would have done credit to any Tier 1 unit in the world. Colonel Carver was slumped against the wall, blood spreading across his uniform shirt from a wound in his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear, sharp, tracking Kate's every movement. She moved to him, knelt, checked the wound, through and through. Clean. He'd live. "Miss Morrison," Carver said, his voice weak but steady. What are you?" Before Kate could answer, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Not the heavy thump of military Blackhawks. Something smaller, faster. Stone moved to the window. "Extraction team." Kate stood, looked at Carver. "I'm someone you should have listened to 3 days ago, Colonel." 3 Little Bird helicopters landed on the tarmac outside the TOC, sleek, black, unmarked. The kind of aircraft that didn't officially exist. Teams of operators in sterile gear disembarked, moving with the same lethal purpose Kate had just demonstrated. The team leader, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much, walked directly to Kate. He ignored Carver, ignored the hostages, ignored Stone. Package secure, Phantom. Kate nodded toward the unconscious Viper. Secure, Hassan al-Rashid confirmed, Iranian intelligence asset. He'll talk. The team leader gestured to his men. They zip-tied Viper and hauled him toward the helicopter. Acceptable work. The files, still in the system. They never got them. Good. The team leader finally acknowledged Carver. Colonel, this operation never happened. You were attacked by unidentified insurgents. Your quick reaction force repelled them with assistance from unidentified coalition partners. Miss Morrison resigned yesterday for personal reasons. Are we clear? Carver looked at Kate, at Stone, at the bodies on the floor, at the efficient, terrifying operators who'd appeared from nowhere. Crystal clear, he said quietly. Outside Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell stood with what remained of his squad, watching the black helicopters, watching the operators who moved like death personified, watching Kate Morrison walk out of the TOC like she'd just finished a routine logistics meeting instead of saving an entire base from destruction. Sullivan was beside him. Jackson was on a stretcher stable, his shoulder wound, packed and bandaged. Wilson stood in silent shock. Kate walked past them. She didn't acknowledge them. She had a mission to finish reports, to file a cover identity, to dissolve. But Mitchell couldn't let her pass. Not without something. Not without acknowledgement. He stepped into her path. She stopped. Looked at him with those flat, empty eyes. Mitchell opened his mouth. Closed it. Everything he'd thought he was, everything he'd believed about warriors and strength and what it meant to serve, all of it, was ash in his mouth. He did the only thing that made sense. He came to attention. And slowly, with every ounce of respect he possessed, he raised his hand in a salute. Not the quick, perfunctory salute he'd give to an officer. This was different. This was the salute of a warrior acknowledging someone who operated on a level he would never reach. This was apology and respect and awe all combined into a single gesture. He held it. 5 seconds that felt like eternity. Kate looked at him. Her expression didn't change. But after a long moment, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, firm. You're a good Marine, Sergeant Mitchell. Be a better man. She walked past him, walked toward the helicopter where Stone was waiting, walked back into the shadows where Ghost belonged. At the edge of the tarmac near the damaged admin building, Senior Master Sergeant Davis stood watching. She'd been there the whole time, watching the battle, watching Kate move through the base like a force of nature, watching the truth unfold. When Kate turned toward the helicopter, their eyes met across 30 yards of scorched concrete. Davis came to attention. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hand in salute. It was different from Mitchell's. Not apology or awe. This was recognition. Professional to professional. Woman warrior to woman warrior. The salute that said, I knew. From the moment I saw you move in that parking lot, I knew you were one of us, and I kept your secret. Kate stopped. For a moment, the mask slipped. Just a fraction. Just enough for Davis to see the exhaustion underneath the weight of all those missions, all those kills, all that invisible sacrifice. Kate returned the salute. Crisp, perfect. A warrior's acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked toward the helicopter, and Davis lowered her hand, watching the Phantom disappear into the sky. She'd tell no one what she'd seen. She'd write no report. Some truths were meant to stay in the shadows. But she would remember, and she would teach the next generation of security forces that warriors came in all shapes, all sizes, all genders. And the most dangerous ones were the ones you never saw coming. Mitchell lowered his salute. His hand was shaking. Behind him, Sullivan, Wilson, and even Jackson from his stretcher all raised their hands in salute, saluting the Phantom as she disappeared into the sky. The aftermath of battle settled over Fort Sentinel like dust after an explosion. The fires had been extinguished. The bodies had been counted and covered. The wounded were being triaged in the medical facility where doctors and nurses worked with the grim efficiency of people who trained for this moment but never quite believed it would come. The base looked like a war zone because it had been a war zone. Bullet holes stitched across building facades. Shattered windows. Scorched concrete where grenades had detonated. The acrid smell of cordite and burnt plastic hung in the air, mixing with the ever-present desert dust. And in the middle of it all, standing near the black helicopters that had appeared from nowhere, Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell felt the full weight of his own ignorance crushing down on him like a physical thing. The salute he'd given Kate Morrison still burned in his arm, in his chest, in his throat where words had failed him. Be a better man. 4 words that cut deeper than any blade because they were true and fair, and he had no defense against them. Stone walked over his Mech 18 slung across his chest, his face weathered and hard as the desert itself. He stopped in front of Mitchell, and his pale green eyes studied the Marine with the kind of assessment that saw through flesh and bone to whatever was underneath. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, Stone said. His voice was gravel and whiskey rough from decades of shouting orders and breathing dust and smoke. Mitchell straightened. Sir, you know what you did wrong. It wasn't a question. Mitchell nodded, his throat tight. Yes, sir. Tell me. Mitchell took a breath. This was harder than taking fire. Harder than carrying wounded men. Harder than anything he'd done in 12 years of service. I underestimated her. I disrespected her. I put my hands on her in anger. His voice cracked slightly. And she still saved my life. Twice. Stone nodded slowly. You know what we do in the teams when someone fucks up like you did? Mitchell braced himself. Whatever was coming, he deserved it. Sir, we teach them better. Stone's expression softened just a fraction. You willing to learn, son? Mitchell blinked. He'd expected punishment, expected to be torn apart. Not this, not mercy. Yes, sir, I am. Then remember this feeling, this shame you're carrying right now. Don't try to bury it. Don't try to rationalize it away. Carry it. Let it make you better. Stone glanced toward the helicopter where Kate was speaking with the extraction team. That woman is one of the finest operators I've ever worked with. I trained her myself, and I've been doing this for 31 years. 31 years, Mitchell repeated quietly. Grenada in '83. I was 32 years old, same age you are now. Thought I was hot shit. Thought I understood combat because I'd done a few missions. Stone's eyes went distant, seeing things that happened decades ago. Then Panama in '89, Desert Storm in '91, Mogadishu in '93. Each one taught me the same lesson. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop learning. And the moment you stop learning in this business is the moment you die. Corporal Sullivan stepped closer, listening. Wilson, too. Even Jackson, sitting up on his stretcher, despite the medic's protests, was paying attention. My best friend died in Mogadishu, Stone continued. James Morrison, Marine Scout sniper, best shot I ever saw, best man I ever knew. He looked at Mitchell. He had a daughter. She was 22 when he died. She joined the agency because she wanted to honor his memory. Wanted to do what he did, protect Americans. The pieces clicked together in Mitchell's mind. Kate Morrison. Kate Morrison, Stone confirmed. I trained her because I promised James I'd watch out for her if anything happened to him. That was 10 years ago. She's been operational for 5 years. Every mission perfect. Every target eliminated or captured. Every American asset she was assigned to protect still breathing. He paused. Until tonight when she almost got killed because a drunk Marine couldn't handle rejection. Mitchell felt sick. The wound she'd carried, the mission, and she was running the danger she'd faced to all of it, while maintaining her cover, while enduring his assault, while accepting Carver's injustice. And she'd still saved them. I don't deserve her forgiveness, Mitchell said quietly. No, you don't. Stone's voice was flat. But she gave it to you anyway. You know why? Mitchell shook his head. Because that's what warriors do. Real warriors. Not the kind who prove themselves by picking fights with women in bars. The kind who save people who don't deserve saving because the mission is bigger than personal grudges. Stone's eyes bored into Mitchell. She saved you because you're American. Because you wear the uniform. Because protecting you was her job. Not because she liked you. Not because you earned it. But because that's who she is. Sullivan spoke up, his voice rough. Chief Stone, my uncle served with you. Robert Sullivan. Stone's expression changed, softened. He turned to Sullivan. Bobby Sullivan, Delta operator, October 4th, 1993. He died covering our exfil from the Bacura market. Took 3 rounds meant for me. Sullivan's eyes were wet. You knew him. I knew him. He was the best door kicker I ever worked with. Had this laugh, this big Irish laugh that could fill a room. Stone's voice was thick with old grief. I think about him every day. Wonder if I'm living up to what he paid for me to live. He'd be proud of you, Sullivan said. Stone looked at Kate still standing by the helicopter. He'd be proud of her too. James Morrison's daughter, Bobby Sullivan's goddaughter. She's got both of them in her. Their courage, their skill, their dedication to protecting people, even when those people don't deserve protection. The weight of that legacy settled over Mitchell like a burial shroud. He'd assaulted the daughter of a fallen hero saved by a man whose friend had died protecting him. The generational link between warriors stretched back decades, and he'd nearly broken it through his own arrogance. What do I do now? Mitchell asked. His voice was small, lost. You become a better man, Stone said. You learn from this. You teach the men coming up behind you. You make sure no one else makes the mistakes you made. He put a hand on Mitchell's shoulder. Heavy, paternal. You don't get redemption, son. You just get the opportunity to do better. Starting now, starting every day for the rest of your life. Mitchell nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. But it was a path forward, and that was more than he deserved. Stone turned to all of them. Mitchell, Sullivan, Wilson, Jackson. You men fought well today. You held your position. You protected each other. That counts for something. Remember that when you remember the rest. He walked away back toward the helicopters, leaving 4 Marines standing in the dust with a lesson that would haunt and shape them for the rest of their lives. Colonel William Carver sat on the running board of an ambulance, his shoulder bandaged, his arm in a sling, watching the black helicopters prepare for departure. A medic was trying to convince him to go to the hospital. He was ignoring her. Stone approached. Carver looked up, and something in his face, pride maybe, or defiance, crumbled when he saw the expression on Stone's face. Chief Warrant Officer Stone, Carver said. His voice was weaker than before, roughened by shock and blood loss. We served together. Desert Storm. Highway 80. That's right. Stone sat down beside him, moving like a man whose body remembered every firefight, every hard landing, every close call. You were a captain then. Your convoy got ambushed by retreating Republican Guard. You called for help. I brought my team. Carver nodded slowly. You pulled 6 of my men out of burning vehicles. I never forgot that. Then let me return the favor. Let me pull you out of something else. Stone's voice was gentle but firm. Bill, you fucked up. You let your prejudices nearly get good people killed. Carver flinched like he'd been struck. I know. Do you really understand what you did? Stone leaned forward. That woman you threatened to fire 3 days ago just saved your life. Saved this whole base. She's been running a counterintelligence operation for 8 weeks, tracking a mole who'd gotten 43 Americans killed. And you looked at her and saw a problem. I was protecting the base, Carver said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, you were protecting yourself, your retirement, your pension, your comfortable little world where everything makes sense and women stay in their lanes and Marines are always right. Stone's voice hardened. And while you were protecting yourself, Viper was selling operational plans to Iranian intelligence. While you were worried about a bar fight, men were dying in Anbar province because someone on your base was feeding intel to the enemy. Carver's face went gray. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You didn't ask questions. You didn't look past the surface. You saw what you expected to see and called it leadership. The words hit like physical blows. Carver sat in silence, staring at his hands, at the blood on his uniform. At the base he'd failed to protect. I'm finished, he said quietly. My career is over. Maybe, maybe not. Stone's voice softened slightly. You made mistakes, Bill. Big ones. But you're not the first officer to let his biases compromise his judgment, and you won't be the last. The question is what you do next. What can I do? I'm a relic. I'm part of the problem. Then be part of the solution. Stone stood his knees, protesting. You've got 2 years until retirement. Use them. Change the culture. Teach the next generation of officers to see what you didn't see. Make sure no one else makes your mistakes. Carver looked up at him. You think I can? I think you have to try. Because if you don't, if you just shuffle papers until your retirement party, then you're exactly what you're afraid of, being a relic whose best days are behind him. Stone offered his hand. But if you use these 2 years to actually lead to actually change things, then maybe you salvage something from this disaster. Carver took the hand, let Stone pull him to his feet. I don't know if I can face her. You don't have a choice. They walked together across the tarmac. Kate was standing alone now, watching the extraction team load Viper onto the helicopter. Her posture was perfect, professional. But Stone, who'd known her for 10 years, who'd trained her, who'd carried the memory of her father like a sacred burden, could see the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders. She turned as they approached. Her face was unreadable. Carver stopped 3 feet away, came to attention as much as his wounded shoulder allowed. Miss Morrison. Colonel. A long silence. The helicopter's rotors were winding up the noise building. I failed you, Carver said. The words came out rough, honest, stripped of ego. I let my prejudices compromise my judgment. I sided against you when you'd done nothing wrong. I threatened your livelihood to protect a Marine who'd assaulted you. He paused, swallowing hard. I nearly got Americans killed because I couldn't see past my own bullshit. Kate's expression didn't change. Yes, you did. No softening, no false comfort, just truth hard and clean. Carver flinched but held her gaze. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I will do better. I'll recommend policy changes, mandatory bias training, cultural reform. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. Don't do it for me, Colonel. Kate's voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Do it for the next woman who walks through your door, the next operator who doesn't fit your picture of what a warrior looks like. Do it because it's right, not because you got caught being wrong. Carver nodded slowly. How do you do it? How do you carry the violence, the isolation, the burden of protecting people who don't even know you exist? Kate glanced at Stone, then back at Carver. Someone has to stand in the dark so others can live in the light. Today that was me. Tomorrow it'll be someone else. That's how it works. My father died doing this job. So did Corporal Sullivan's uncle. So did a lot of good people. Her voice was steady, but something flickered in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or just weariness. They didn't die so I could be thanked. They died because the mission mattered more than their lives. I honor that by doing the same. Carver stood there diminished, humbled, facing a truth he had spent his career avoiding. I'm sorry for everything. Apology noted, Colonel. Kate turned toward the helicopter. Now secure your perimeter. Assess your vulnerabilities. The enemy knew exactly where to hit you. Fix that before they come back. It was a dismissal. Professional. Final. Carver saluted. Kate returned it crisply, then walked toward the helicopter where Stone was waiting. Stone turned to Carver. She'll never forget what you did, Bill, but she's giving you the chance to be better. Don't waste it. I won't. Stone nodded and followed Kate to the helicopter. They lifted off 5 minutes later, taking Viper and the extraction team with them. Carver watched until the helicopters were black dots against the darkening sky, then walked slowly back toward his damaged command center. He had 2 years. 2 years to fix what he'd broken. 2 years to teach what he'd learned. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. The base slowly found its rhythm again. Generators restored power. Communications came back online. Quick reaction force returned from the main gate, bloodied, but intact. Security forces established a perimeter twice as tight as before. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of amber and blood. Corporal Danny Sullivan found Chief Warrant Officer Stone standing near the maintenance hangar, smoking a cigarette and staring at nothing. Stone didn't smoke often anymore. But sometimes after firefights, after close calls, after days when the weight of all the years and all the dead friends became too heavy to carry, without help, he allowed himself one. Sullivan approached carefully. Chief Stone, Stone turned. Corporal, can I ask you something? Shoot. Sullivan hesitated, then pushed forward. My uncle Bobby Sullivan. You said he died in Mogadishu, October 4th, 1990. That's right. He was Delta Force, Special Operations. Stone nodded, waiting. Sir, I need to know. Was it worth it, his death? Did it mean something? The question hung in the desert air. Stone took a long drag on his cigarette, let the smoke out slowly. Your uncle saved my life. He saw an RPG coming for the vehicle I was in. He pushed me out of the way, took the blast himself. Sullivan's eyes were wet. You were there. I was there. I held him while he died. He knew what was happening. He was conscious until the end. Stone's voice was rough. You know what his last words were? Sullivan shook his head. He said, tell my family I love them. Tell them it mattered. Then he smiled, actually smiled. And he said, Frank, you better make this worth it. You better live a life that's worth what I paid. A tear ran down Sullivan's cheek. Did you, I try. Every day I try. Some days I succeed, most days I fail. But I keep trying. Stone looked at the younger man. Your uncle was the best of us. He was brave and loyal and funny and good. The world is smaller without him, but the world is better because he lived, because he made the choice he made. Was it a choice in that moment? That's the thing about real warriors, son. It's not a choice in the moment. It's a choice you make every day before the moment comes. Your uncle chose years before Mogadishu to be the kind of man who'd push someone else out of harm's way. By the time that RPG was coming, the choice was already made. Sullivan wiped his eyes. I want to be like him. Then be like him. Be loyal. Be brave. Be the man who saves others even when it costs you. Stone stubbed out his cigarette. And be better than Jake Mitchell was 3 days ago. Be better than Colonel Carver was this morning. Learn from their mistakes so you don't have to make them yourself. Yes, sir. They stood in silence as the sun touched the horizon. Then Sullivan spoke again, his voice tentative. Chief Stone, Miss Morrison. She's Bobby's goddaughter. Stone nodded. James Morrison was your uncle's best friend. They went through selection together, fought together. When James's daughter was born, he asked Bobby to be her godfather. Bobby took it seriously, sent her letters from every deployment, presents for every birthday. He loved that little girl like she was his own. She doesn't remember him. She was 6 when he died, but James told her stories, and I told her stories. And now she carries both of them with her. Your uncle's loyalty, her father's dedication, their courage. Stone's voice was thick. She's the best of both of them, and she's out there right now doing what they did, protecting people who'll never know her name. Sullivan looked toward where the helicopters had disappeared. I wish I could tell her. About Bobby, about how proud he'd be. She knows. Trust me, son. She knows. The maintenance hangar was dark and empty. Kate Morrison sat alone on a stack of equipment crates, the M4 rifle she'd taken from Sarah Michael Bennett, field stripped on a clean cloth in front of her. The components were laid out in precise order. Bolt carrier group, charging handle, upper receiver, lower receiver, buffer spring, each piece cleaned and oiled and ready for reassembly. This was her ritual, the only way she knew how to process what had happened. The violence, the killing, the choices made in fractions of seconds that determined who lived and who died. She picked up the bolt carrier group, examined it under the single bare bulb hanging overhead. Carbon scoring on the bolt face, normal wear from a weapon that had been fired in combat. She took a dental pick and carefully scraped away the carbon, working with the precision of a surgeon. Michael Bennett, 24 years old, from Ohio. She'd taken his rifle and his magazines and used them to save lives. Used them to kill the men who'd killed him. It was the only repayment she could offer, the only eulogy that mattered. She cleaned each component with the same meticulous care, wiping down the bointu, checking the extractor spring for wear, removing every trace of carbon and dust and the residue of violence. In Bennett's vest, she'd found his dog tags. She held them now, feeling their weight. Sarah Michael Bennett, O-positive Methodist. A whole life reduced to 2 metal tags and a religion. She thought about her father, James Morrison, Marine Scout sniper, killed in action October 4th, 1993, Mogadishu, Somalia. She'd been 22, old enough to understand death, young enough to believe she could prevent it from taking anyone else she cared about. She'd joined the CIA because of him, trained under Stone because of him, become the Phantom because she'd wanted to honor his memory by doing what he did, protecting Americans, standing between the innocent and the darkness. But God, she was tired. 10 years since she joined the agency. 5 years operational. 5 years of cover identities and false names and relationships that couldn't be real. A single tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angry at herself for the weakness. Operators didn't cry. Ghosts didn't have feelings. But Kate Morrison, daughter of James Morrison, goddaughter of Bobby Sullivan, human being beneath all the training and all the violence, she cried. Just for a moment, just long enough to acknowledge the weight. Then she locked it away, filed it under later, buried it where it couldn't interfere with the mission. She reassembled the rifle. Her hands moved with practiced economy, each motion smooth and certain. The bolt carrier group slid into the upper receiver. The charging handle locked into place. The upper and lower receivers mated with a solid click. She seated an empty magazine, pulled the charging handle, aimed at a far wall, and squeezed the trigger. The dry fire was a crisp, clean click. Perfect. The rifle was ready for its next user. She stood and walked to a secure weapons locker, placed the M4 inside with reverent care. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered. "Rest easy." The hangar door opened. Stone stepped inside, 2 bottles of water in his hands. He offered one to Kate without a word. She took it, drank half in one pull. They sat together on the equipment crates, not speaking. They didn't need to. 31 years and 10 years. Grenada to Mogadishu to today. The accumulated weight of all the missions, all the kills, all the people saved and lost. Finally, Stone spoke. "Package is talking." Viper gave up his entire network. Iranian intelligence, Syrian mercenaries, 3 other moles and coalition bases. We're rolling them up now. Kate nodded. Mission success. 43 dead Americans avenged. Future attacks prevented. It should have felt like victory. It felt like exhaustion. "What's next?" she asked. "Pakistan, 10 days, high-value target, Tier 1 priority." Stone looked at her. "You don't have to take it. You could rotate stateside, take some time." "And do what? Pretend I'm normal?" Kate's laugh was bitter. "I haven't been normal since I was 22 years old." "Your father used to say something, right before Mogadishu." Stone's voice was soft. He said, "Frank, if I don't make it, tell Kate that the fight is worth it. Not for glory, not for medals, for the person standing next to you." Kate looked at him. He knew he wasn't coming back. No, he knew there was a chance, and he went anyway. Because Bobby was going, because the mission mattered, because protecting American lives was more important than his own. Stone put a hand on her shoulder. "You honored that today. You saved Marines who didn't deserve you. That's what warriors do. How much longer can I do this? Until you can't. Then someone else picks up the rifle." Stone's voice was gentle. "The torch doesn't go out, Kate. It just changes hands. Your father passed it to me, I passed it to you. Someday you'll pass it to someone else. That's how we win. Not through individual glory, but through the continuous line of people willing to stand in the dark." Kate leaned against him just for a moment. The closest thing to a father she had left. The man who'd carried her actual father's memory for 3 decades. "I miss him," she said quietly. "So do I. Every day." Stone's voice was rough. "But I see him in you. His dedication, his courage, his absolute refusal to quit, even when quitting makes sense. You're the best parts of him, Kate, and Bobby too. You're what they both would have become if they'd lived." They sat in the darkness as the desert night settled around them. Outside, Fort Sentinel was healing. Inside, 2 operators were doing the same. Tomorrow, Kate Morrison would cease to exist. Tomorrow, a new cover identity would be activated and the Phantom would move to Pakistan to hunt another target. Tomorrow, the mission would continue. But tonight, just for a few hours, Kate allowed herself to be human. To grieve. To hurt. To carry the weight of all the violence she'd committed and all the lives she'd saved. Tomorrow, she'd be the ghost again. Tonight, she was just Kate. Dawn came to Fort Sentinel like a reluctant promise. The eastern sky lightened from black to gray to pale rose. The stars faded one by one. The desert, which had witnessed so much violence the day before, was calm and empty and indifferent. Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell stood on the perimeter wall, his assigned guard post, though he hadn't been ordered here. He'd come because he couldn't sleep. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kate Morrison moving across that rooftop, saw her eliminating threats with the kind of lethal grace that belonged in legends, not reality. Corporal Sullivan climbed up beside him. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Sullivan said, "You good man, no." Mitchell's voice was flat. "I'll never be good again." "But maybe that's the point." "What do you mean, Bumpties?" "I spent 12 years thinking I was a warrior, thinking I understood what that meant. It took 12 minutes to learn I didn't know shit." Mitchell stared at the horizon. "She's what we should all aspire to be. And I hit her. God help me, I hit her." Sullivan was quiet. "Then my uncle died saving Chief Stone's life. Mogadishu, 1993. Stone told me today." Mitchell looked at him. "I'm sorry." He was a Delta operator. Special Missions Unit, the best of the best. And you know what Stone said? He said my uncle made the choice, years before that moment, to be the kind of man who'd push someone else out of harm's way. Sullivan's voice was thick. "That's what real warriors do. They protect people, even people who don't deserve it. Like she protected us. Like she protected us." They watched the sun rise together, the two Marines who'd learned a lesson that would define the rest of their careers. They'd seen the ghost. They'd been saved by the phantom. And they would never forget what real warriors look like. In his office, Colonel Carver sat at his desk, pen in hand, resignation letter half written. He'd been working on it for an hour. The words wouldn't come. A knock on the door. Stone stepped inside without waiting for permission. "Don't send that yet," Stone said, gesturing to the letter. "Frank, I'm done. I'm the problem." "Then be the solution. Stay. Teach the next generation. Make sure no one else makes your mistakes." Stone moved to the window, looked out at the base. "You've got 2 years, Bill. Use them. Change the culture. Implement the reforms you promised. If you quit now, nothing changes. But if you stay and actually lead, actually fix the broken systems that let this happen, then maybe you salvage something." Carver stared at the letter, at the easy way out, at retirement and pension and the comfortable lie that he'd served honorably. He tore the letter in half. 2 years, he said. "I'll make them count." Stone nodded. "That's all anyone can ask." At the auxiliary airfield on the north side of the base, a gray C-130 Hercules sat on the tarmac, its engines warming up. The cargo ramp was down. Inside, Kate Morrison sat on a canvas bench seat, a new mission packet in her hands. Pakistan, 10 days. A Taliban commander with links to Al-Qaeda. High-value target. The mission would be dangerous. They were all dangerous. Stone climbed aboard, sat beside her. "You ready?" Kate looked at the file, at the target's photo, at the maps and intelligence reports and tactical plans. "Always." "Pakistan's different. More complicated. More dangerous." "I know." Stone was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your father would be proud. So would Bobby. So am I." Kate looked at him, at this man who'd carried 2 dead friends' memories for 3 decades, who'd trained her and protected her and been the closest thing to a father she'd had since she was 22. "Thank you, Frank, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you come home." The loadmaster signaled. "Time to go." Stone stood, squeezed her shoulder once, and walked down the ramp. Kate watched him go. Watched Fort Sentinel shrinking in the window as the C-130 taxied down the runway. Watched the desert falling away as they climbed into the morning sky. Somewhere down there, Jake Mitchell was learning to be a better man. William Carver was learning to be a better leader. Danny Sullivan was carrying his uncle's memory forward. And Kate Morrison was disappearing again, becoming someone else, heading toward the next mission in an endless war that had no medals and no recognition and no end. She touched the bracelet on her wrist. Mogadishu 93. Her father. Bobby Sullivan. All the ghosts who'd come before. The torch doesn't go out. It just changes hands. She opened the mission packet and started reading. By the time they reached cruising altitude, Kate Morrison had ceased to exist. The phantom was hunting again. Below, the New Mexico desert stretched endlessly brown and gold and empty. Kate pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching Fort Sentinel shrink to a toy model, then a collection of geometric shapes, then nothing at all. Somewhere down there in a bar called the Scorpion's Tail, photographs still hung on the walls. Grenada, 1983. Panama, 1989. Desert Storm, 1991. Wars that had been won, enemies that had been beaten, victories that tasted the way victories were supposed to taste. Someday maybe there'd be a photograph on that wall from October 2003. The day Fort Sentinel was saved by unidentified coalition partners. The day a ghost walked among Marines and they lived to tell the story. But her face wouldn't be in it. Her name wouldn't be spoken. The only evidence she'd been there at all would be in the memories of men who'd learned what real warriors look like. Kate touched the bracelet on her wrist. Mogadishu 93. Her father James Morrison. Bobby Sullivan. And now Michael Bennett, whose rifle she'd cleaned and returned to service, whose memory she'd honored the only way she knew how. The dead were piling up. The names were accumulating. Each one a weight she carried forward into the next mission, and the next, and the next. The torch doesn't go out. It just changes hands. Kate opened the Pakistan mission folder. A new name waited inside, a new identity, a new cover story. By the time the C-130 landed in Islamabad, Kate Morrison would cease to exist. Someone else would walk off that plane. Someone else would hunt the next target, save the next life fight, the next battle in the endless war. And when that mission was done, there'd be another, and another. Until the day came when she couldn't pick up the rifle anymore, when her reflexes slowed, or her luck ran out, or the weight became too much to carry. But not today. Today, she was still the phantom, still the ghost in the machine, still the invisible guardian standing between Americans and the darkness that wanted to consume them. She looked out the window one last time. Fort Sentinel was gone now, swallowed by distance and desert. But Jake Mitchell was down there somewhere, learning to be better. Danny Sullivan was carrying his uncle's photograph over his heart. William Carver was tearing up a resignation letter and choosing to lead instead of quit. Davis was watching over her base with new eyes, seeing possibilities she'd never considered before. They would remember her, not as Kate Morrison logistics contractor, but as the ghost who saved them, the warrior they'd underestimated, the woman who'd absorbed their contempt and their violence and still chose to protect them because that's what the mission demanded. And in remembering her, maybe they'd be better. Maybe they'd see the next operator who didn't fit their picture of what a warrior should be, and maybe they'd look twice. Maybe they'd ask questions. Maybe they'd learn. That was worth something. That was worth all of it. Kate closed the mission folder and leaned back in the canvas seat. The C-130's engines droned on, carrying her toward Pakistan, toward the next target, toward the next mission in an endless war. The desert fell away behind them. The sky stretched infinitely ahead. And somewhere between earth and heaven, the ghost flew on, carrying the torch forward, keeping the darkness at bay for one more day, one more mission, one more life saved. Because someone had to, because the fight was